At least 150 migrants have crossed the channel illegally this morning. It's an unprecedented 10th day of small boat crossings.
So it takes the total who have crossed since the 1st of March to more than 2,200.
Well, a third small boat is currently in the channel and making steady progress towards British waters.
Well, joining us now, GB News Home and Security Editor Mark White. Mark, what can you tell us?
Well, this has clearly plunged the government's border security policy into even deeper crisis. 10 straight days is unprecedented at this time of the year when, of course, we get bad weather in the channel. And weather conditions haven't been brilliant. OK, they've been just about passable on most days. But again, today, it's very difficult going out there in the channel. But despite that, in the early hours this morning, about 1 a.m. first of all, and then again at 5 a.m, 2 small boats crossed with around 120 migrants on board. And as we speak, that third small boat that was spotted a little earlier this morning is about 15 minutes from reaching UK waters. And once it does, the inevitable happens. A Border Force vessel will be waiting to pick those up on that boat and take them to Dover Harbour. Keir Starmer, we know, has made a central plank of his border policy smashing the gangs, a law and order approach to try to dismantle those criminal networks that are pushing these boats out in ever greater numbers. And while it would have been unfair, of course, to criticise the new government just 2 or 3 or 4 months in to office, the fact is we are over 8 months into this new Labour government with this policy. Not only has it not slowed down the numbers crossing, we are seeing unprecedented numbers at this time of the year crossing the channel now, well over 4,000 and at least 20% up on where we were at this point last year.
Migrant crossings surge in March, raising questions over Keir Starmer's border policy. The government's border security strategy has come under renewed scrutiny as at least 150 migrants crossed the English Channel in small boats this morning, pushing the total number of illegal crossings in March alone to more than 2,200. The concerning figures, reported live on GB News in an unprecedented breaking news announcement, mark the 10th consecutive day of crossings despite challenging weather conditions. Broadcasters Ellie Costello and Nana Aqua interrupted their regular programming to deliver the stark update, underscoring the scale of the crisis facing Prime Minister Keir Starmer's administration. Political analysts have been quick to point out that the sustained wave of crossings raises serious doubts over the effectiveness of Labour's border strategy, which has been positioned as a firm law and order approach to tackling illegal immigration. GB News correspondent Mark White provided on-the-ground updates, describing the situation as a deepening crisis for the government. Despite difficult conditions in the channel, migrants are still making these perilous journeys, he said. At about 1 a.m, the first boat was detected, followed by another at 5 a.m. A third boat is currently on course to enter UK waters, where it will inevitably be intercepted by Border Force and taken to Dover Harbour. Since taking office, Starmer has emphasized a crackdown on the criminal gangs responsible for smuggling people across the channel, vowing to disrupt their networks and curb illegal migration at its source. However, the sheer persistence of crossings suggests that his administration faces significant hurdles in enforcing this vision. While the Labour government has sought to distinguish itself from the controversial Rwanda deportation scheme of the previous Conservative administration, it now finds itself under mounting pressure to produce an alternative solution that is both humane and effective in deterring illegal migration. Critics argue that without a comprehensive deterrence policy, the UK risks being perceived as an increasingly attractive destination for those willing to embark on dangerous sea journeys. The issue of migrant crossings remains one of the most contentious in British politics, balancing national security concerns with humanitarian obligations under international law. With a general election on the horizon, Labour must now prove to the electorate that it can effectively manage border security without resorting to draconian measures that alienate progressive voters. The latest surge in crossings is likely to dominate Prime Minister's questions this week, with Conservative MPs expected to push for immediate policy changes. Meanwhile, humanitarian organizations have continued to stress the need for safe and legal routes for asylum seekers, warning that harsh deterrence policies will only drive more migrants into the hands of exploitative trafficking networks.
Sir Keir Starmer has indicated that Labour is going to block a legal ban on first cousins being able to marry in England and Wales. Why is that? Is the Prime Minister in favour of interbreeding?
Look, I'm not aware of him being so definite on that.
So you will block this?
I think these issues arise. I don't, think we're going to adopt that position on this question.
Sorry, what position are you adopting on first cousins marrying? What position is Labour adopting on the issue of whether first cousins should marry in England and Wales? Should they or shouldn't they?
Well, I don't think we're planning a legal change on whatever the current position is on that at the moment. Not that I'm aware of.
So at the moment, it's not legally banned for first cousins to marry in England and Wales, despite the obvious health implications of interbreeding. Richard Holden is suggesting a legal ban on first cousins marrying, and at the moment it looks like Labour might block that. Why? Labour cannot possibly be in favour of first cousins marrying, can they?
Well, I'm not aware of our plans to change the current law at the moment on that question. If we are planning to change the law, and I promise I'll come back on your programme and talk to you about it, but as of today, I'm not aware that we're planning a legal change on that issue.
OK, but do you think first cousins should be able to marry in England and Wales?
Well, as a minister, I'm not planning to change the law on that right now.
But Mr McFadden, what do you think? Should they be allowed to?
Then I'll come back on.
But should they be allowed to? It's a simple yes or no question. I don't think first cousins should be able to marry in England and Wales. What do you think?
You're the first person ever to ask me the question.
OK, so answer it.
When the government's got a position of changing the law, I'll happily come back and talk to you about it.
But what do you think? Do you think first cousins should be able to marry in England and Wales?
Well, that's the current law as it stands, I think. We're not planning to change the law on that. As far as I know, if there's a change in that and the government decides to change the law, then I'll happily come back on and talk to you about it.
OK, so you don't seem to be willing to answer that question.
The proposal, which has yet to be formally introduced in Parliament, is expected to reignite debates over personal freedoms, multiculturalism, and state intervention in private relationships. Some conservative figures, particularly on the party's right wing, argue that the government has a duty to legislate against practices that pose public health risks. Senior Tories have pointed to studies showing that children born from first cousin marriages face a higher risk of genetic disorders, particularly within some communities where such unions are more prevalent. Former Health Secretary Sajid Javid has previously voiced concerns over the issue, and the latest push for a ban is reportedly backed by MPs who believe existing laws do not go far enough. However, Labour sources suggest the party will resist the move, viewing it as an unnecessary and potentially discriminatory measure. Critics within the opposition argue that any ban would disproportionately affect certain ethnic and religious groups, potentially fueling divisive narratives. A Labour spokesperson, speaking off the record, indicated that the party is not convinced that legislation is the right approach and believes that education and genetic screening offer a more effective way to mitigate risks. The genetic risks associated with first cousin marriages are well documented. Studies have found that children born from such unions can be up to twice as likely to suffer from congenital conditions. In some areas of the UK, particularly where cousin marriages are culturally prevalent, rates of birth defects have been reported to be higher than the national average. However, opponents of a legal ban argue that such a measure would be draconian and difficult to enforce. They also warn that it could set a precedent for government overreach into personal relationships. Where do we draw the line? One labor member asked. Are we going to legislate against all relationships with any increased health risks? This is a question of personal choice and individual liberty. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has sought to project an image of pragmatism and political moderation, keen to avoid culture war battles that could alienate key voter groups. However, the party's opposition to the ban may be seen by some as an example of Labour prioritising identity politics over public health concerns. For Rishi Sunak's Conservatives, this could be an opportunity to exploit Labour's position and portray the opposition as out of step with mainstream public sentiment. If the government moves forward with the proposal, it may force Starmer to defend a position that could be unpopular with swing voters. As the debate unfolds, Labour will need to navigate the fine line between upholding civil liberties and responding to legitimate concerns about genetic health risks. Whether the party can strike that balance without alienating key constituencies remains to be seen. One thing is certain: the politics of this issue are as complex as the genetics themselves.